So, this is my JFK conspiracy shelf. I thought I would show you the different volumes I have. This is Masters of Deceit. It's an old paperback by J. Edgar Hoover. And it's not really about the Kennedy assassination, but I think it's relevant to have it here. If you've studied it, just like this copy of Profiles in Courage is not about the assassination, but it's a book written by Jacqueline Kennedy. This book, A Texan Looks at Lyndon. When Jack Ruby was in prison, he said that if you wanted to understand what really happened, that you should read this book. There's a lot of parts of it that have been underlined. This book is called Mafia Kingfish, and it's about Carlos Marcello. And Carlos Marcello was the boss of New Orleans, or he was the boss of that southeastern part of the country. And there is a theory that organized crime thought that Kennedy owed them a debt for getting him elected, particularly in Chicago, and that they were behind the assassination or helped in it. This book is more general. It's called Dynasty and Disaster, and it just talks about all of the bad luck that has happened to the Kennedy brothers and their extended family. There's been a lot of tragedies. Starting with Joseph Kennedy Jr. in World War II. And even recently there has been tragedy. They call it the Kennedy curse. This is called the JFK assassination, the facts and the theories. And it covers the most common conspiracy theories. And it gives you the info and lets you make your decision. This book is called They've Killed the President, The Search for the Murderers of John F. Kennedy. And it's another one that has considerable doubt of the Warren Commission. For example, this photograph here that has some strange anomalies on it. For example, both heads are identical. You could copy that, make it into a transparency, and overlay it on that one, and they're identical, but the bodies are different heights. That's just one of the many anomalies. on that photograph. So now this is a straightforward telling of the assassination with respect to the Warren Commission findings, and it does not delve into any conspiracies. But this book was written by Jim Bishop, who also wrote a book called A Day in the Life of President Kennedy, which was published posthumously after the assassination. And then he followed it up with this book. In the foreword, he talks about how he had some differences with Jackie Kennedy, and but this book is much different tone than the very positive picture laid out in A Day in the Life of President Kennedy. So he seems a little bit angry when he writes this book. But it doesn't go into any really conspiracy theories. Now, this book is called JFK Conspiracy of Silence. This came out around the time the movie JFK came out. And it's written by one of the doctors who was at Parkland, who claims that there was ample evidence that Kennedy was shot from different directions. And some of the pictures are particularly graphic, so I'm not going to show them. But it is interesting that a source, one of the physicians at Parkland Hospital worked on them, would be writing that book. Here's another copy of Profiles in Courage, a commemorative edition that I own. It's the same book as this one that I showed you in the beginning. But I like them both, and I'm keeping them both. This one doesn't have pictures in it like the other one does. Because Profiles in Courage is a book that Kennedy wrote talking about different people, different American politicians who did acts that hurt their own careers but they did it for the greater good. So, and it is a good, interesting book if you'd like to read it sometime. This is one of the holy grails of the JFK assassination books. It's called On the Trail of the Assassins by Jim Garrison. Now, I don't have the counterpart to this, which is called Crossfire by Jim Mars, and I wish I did have it, because the movie JFK was based on both of these books. That's Jim Garrison. Now, a lot of people think that his specific theory was way off, but he did at least do one good thing, and that was he brought the Zapruder film to the public. Without his trial, it probably never would have been seen. And he did... Well, at this point, let me just say this. By the time he tried Clay Shaw, a lot of the people in the country already had given up on the idea on the Warren Commission. I also have this in audiobook form. This is very old. This is 20-something years old. And it's narrated by Ed Asner, who was in the movie. This is a abridged version of the book. It's obviously not the whole book on here because it's still on cassette tapes. I have a cassette tape player, but I just keep this because I used to listen to it when I was young. This is called Oswald and New Orleans, a case for conspiracy with the CIA. Jim Garrison writes in it a little bit, and it's a long book, and it's interesting. If you want to understand Oswald, you really have to understand what was going on in New Orleans the months before the assassination. Some people think that during that time he was being painted as a suspect or as a patsy by his activities in New Orleans that were widely recorded. Considering in the 1960s, not very many people would be filmed or taped or even photographed. And Oswald was filmed, recorded on the radio, on TV. It's just very strange. This is called Cause of Death by Cyril Wecht. He is a strong opponent of the Warren Commission. He's a forensic pathologist. And he is not just talking about JFK, but also Robert Kennedy, Elvis Presley, and the Chappaquiddick case involving Ted Kennedy. And he is putting in his 2 cents about the actual causes of death of these individuals. He is very much doubts the official narrative on all of these cases. And there's a foreword by none other than F. Lee Bailey, the very famous trial attorney. This is the story of PT-109, Expendable. And it's by Chandler Whipple. It's not really by John F. Kennedy, but it looks like it's written by John F. Kennedy. But it's about the story of PT-109. John Kennedy never wrote a book about PT-109. On the back, written by hand, Chester Nimitz writes, "This well-written and detailed account of the operations of the motor torpedo boats in the South Pacific in World War II fill a long-standing gap in the story of U.S. naval operations against the Japanese." My book's coming apart, so I have a rubber band holding it together. It's old. This was put out when um, 1962, and the reason this was put out is because he was going to be running for re-election. So they were really going on the PT-109 bandwagon to get conservative voters, because they thought that's where they had a weak spot. Kind of hard to get it back in there with that rubber band. This is a little small, kind of written for juveniles. It's called A History Mystery, Who Shot JFK? And it's written for kids. And it introduces children to theories about, or conspiracy theories, which is, I find, or young adults maybe, which I find very interesting, because, well, let's just say that right now, regardless of the House committee in the 70s about assassinations and anything else you've heard, still the definitive, authoritative consensus is that what was in the Warren Commission. That's what happened to President Kennedy. There is no other, there is no gray area about that. This book is called Assassination, and it covers a little bit of President Kennedy, but it also talks about a lot of assassination conspiracy theories, including theories about, well, a lot of famous people, famous political people, princesses and so forth, who there's suspicions of assassination. And it goes into, it's a conspiracy theory book, basically, for whatever it's worth. This is called Nightmare in Dallas. This is written by Beverly Oliver. And Beverly Oliver was an exotic dancer. She claims to have worked at a strip club opposite the Carousel Club. And that picture shows her at this time. She claimed to be the babushka lady at the assassination, wearing the outfit that that had what's called a babushka, like a headscarf wrapped around her head. She says those pictures were taken by Jack Ruby. She says she knew Jada, one of the dancers at the Carousel Club, whose real name was Janet Comporto. She participated with Oliver Stone and Jim Garrison. I think there's a lot of room for doubt about her story, but I don't know if she's exactly a reliable storyteller, but some people believe it. Another book I wish I had in this set is one by Richard Belzer called Hit List, and it talks about all the mysterious deaths that have happened to witnesses. Now, this is the angriest book I own regarding the assassination. It's called Case Open: The Omissions, Distortions, and Falsifications of a Book Called Case Closed. There was a book written called Case Closed that tried to put to bed all of the conspiracy theories. Well, this guy hated it, and he writes a very angry book disputing everything that was written in Case Closed. Case Closed basically said the Warren Commission was correct and we need to get on with our lives. And this whole book is a refutation of that, everything in this book. If you're wondering why I have lamb chops up here, or lamb chop, it's because President Kennedy and Jackie were holding this puppet in the car. It was a gift to them when they landed in Dallas. They were holding it and playing with it. A lot of the witnesses thought it was a dog, but it was actually lamb chops. It was in the seat with him at the time of the assassination. This is the complete book of facts, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, dates, places, and people. And it's really just an index, in alphabetical order, about everything you like. If you want to know who was David Ferrie, you might hear that name a lot if you start digging into the Kennedy assassination. Well, here's a picture of him. And photographs of David Ferrie show a man of outlandish appearance. This is partially because he suffered from a disease that caused him to lose all the hair on his body, including his head and eyebrows. He usually compensated for this by wearing a cheap red wig and obviously phony eyebrows. Ferrie had a reputation as an excellent pilot who flew dangerous missions into Cuba before the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was active in right-wing organizations in New Orleans, especially with anti-Castro Cubans. He was also an associate of Guy Bannister and did work for mafioso Carlos Marcello. This is all of the people, all of the things, all of the terms, the witnesses, the locations, evidence, palm print on rifle. So you can probably see at this point that there is a cottage industry of writing books about the Kennedy assassination. There is a whole industry devoted to it. There's thousands of books written about Kennedy. These are just a few of them. This is Mona Lisa in Camelot. How Jacqueline Kennedy and Da Vinci's masterpiece charmed and captivated a nation. And you're like, what? In December 1962, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa set sail from Paris to New York for what many knew would be the riskiest art exhibition ever mounted. The fragile painting, sealed in a temperature-controlled, bulletproof box, traveled like a head of state, accompanied by armed guards and constant surveillance. The driving force behind the famous painting's high-profile visit was First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, who convinced French Cultural Minister André Malraux and National Gallery Director John Walker to share the masterpiece with the American people. She overcame the fierce objections of art officials who feared the journey would ruin the world's most celebrated smile, and Lisa fever soon swept the nation as nearly 2 million Americans attended exhibits in Washington, D.C. and New York City. It was the greatest outpouring of appreciation for a single work of art in American history, and as only Jacqueline Kennedy could do, she infused America's first museum blockbuster show with a unique sense of pageantry that ignited a national love affair with the arts. This is a side story, but it's important to understand the impact the Kennedys had. Now, this is a particularly interesting book. It's called What Really Happened, JFK, written by a woman who used to work for the Central Intelligence Agency, whose father was one of Kennedy's photographers. He took that picture. That's him taking a picture. That's her and the president right there. There's the king. And she has 501 questions and answers. And she answers them. And her opinion is very blunt. She doesn't beat around the bush. She has the people, the places, the aftermath, all the information. She has backup in a large photo section. Very, very interesting book. And I did already pull this one out, but this is A Day in the Life of President Kennedy by Jim Bishop. This was Jim Bishop stayed in the White House with the Kennedys and for a few weeks, and he put it all together to document one typical day in the White House. This was very much done to re-elect President Kennedy. This was a re-election book, and the tone of it is extremely positive, almost ideal. And he has hour by hour. This is called President Kennedy has been shot. It's all about the news broadcasts and the day. This doesn't take any particular conspiratorial position, but it also includes a CD of all kinds of important broadcasts. Experience the moment-to-moment account of the 4 days that changed America, and you can listen to it. It's quite long, and it has radio broadcasts, news alerts, comments, dictatapes from the police officers, from the cabinet that was on a plane towards Japan. Lots and lots of pictures. Very straightforward. It's just a historical document. This book is called Killing the Truth. Deceit, Inception in the JFK Case. It's huge. Once again, we're talking about gaps in the evidence. We're talking about the weaknesses in the Warren Commission. Very, very long book. Gutsy. No one should miss his summary of the hard evidence of a conspiracy. This is Bernstein and Woodward's All the President's Men. Full of newspaper clippings from the time period. The Watergate case. Whoever owned this book kept all the clippings from the paper. What does Watergate have to do with the Kennedy assassination? Well, I suggest you research it and find out for yourself. But some people think there's a lot there that It has everything to do with it. So this is a Life magazine. It's the black font Life, the only one they ever did. The assassination of President Kennedy. Features some stills from the Zapruder film. I have shown this on a couple of videos already, but you can look. I'll probably do another video of it. I'm going to set it aside. Let's look at the second shelf. So, what is this? This is basically a magazine that you could buy for 50 cents. And this magazine came out because it was a few years and they still had not made a price-to-own version of the Warren Commission for people to read. They were just going on what they heard on the news. So during that time, books like this came out. And they had more of an impact on what the public thought. So they put this out. They put out this cheaply printed, pulpy-looking magazine that contained the Warren Commission report, or at least a summary. Answering the questions, done in a tacky, like, find out, starting revelations way. I mean, this is not really, it doesn't seem like something that takes the proper seriousness of the occurrence. But it was done to flood the public in a cheap way with the facts of the Warren Commission. They had put it in a newspaper, but not everyone could get that, so this was another attempt to counter the conspiracy books. So this itself is a interesting historical document. I don't like to open it very much because it was printed on cheap paper, and the more you play with it, the more it will tear up. Here's a copy of Newsweek from 1962 with Kennedy on the cover. Just a relic of the time. And it gives us, a year before Kennedy was assassinated, the state of the country. Here's two very underground looking books. They're both called Whitewash. I have two of them. I have Whitewash 2 and Whitewash 4. The FBI Secret Service cover-up. This is desktop published stuff. The kind of stuff that you couldn't find in a mainstream bookstore. You might have ordered it from a magazine catalog, or found it in a surplus store or some store that would be more prone to have stuff that wasn't afraid to question the government's position. Lots of salacious stuff in these. Whitewash 2, Whitewash 4, the JFK assassination transcript. It's also interesting to own when it's coming apart. It's interesting to own this because this is stuff of the time period. This is what people were reading at that time to formulate their opinions. Here's two of the most notorious and significant books ever made. This one is called Who Killed Kennedy, and by Thomas Buchanan. But this actually was a French book. You can see all of the different international versions made of it. This is the very first in-print challenge to the Warren Commission ever made. And it challenges it. Starting with the idea that in every other country in the world, they felt like this was a conspiracy. This book had a big impact on the population and their opinion of the Warren Commission. That's why they scrambled to get out cheaper magazines and so forth of the Warren Commission. And the other one is Rush to Judgment by Mark Lane. And he, is an attorney, critiques the Warren Commission and tears it apart, finding all the holes in it. He also made a movie that went along with it. This is also considered one of the most damning books against the Warren Commission. So these, more than Jim Garrison, more than anything else, these two books are what started the real path towards doubting the Warren Commission. Here's another copy of The Day Kennedy Was Shot by Jim Bishop. It's the same book I showed you on top, but it's the hardcover one. This book is called Red Friday. November 22nd, 1963 by Carlos Ringier. You can look at the table of contents and already tell what this is going to be about. It's got testimony pulled out of the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission book is 26 volumes, including a summary volume, which is what most people read. The remaining volumes were just the evidence that was full of holes and contradictions. And the biggest critique of the Warren Commission is that it was already had a conclusion, and they were just taking evidence to support the conclusion and not looking at anything else. That's the biggest conclusion. American Legacy, the story of John and Caroline Kennedy. This is about the kids who, Caroline is still alive, but of course John Kennedy Jr. passed away under strange circumstances in the 90s, right before it was said he was going to run for president. This book is called Marina and Lee, and this is a very controversial book. This author interviewed Marina Oswald, and Marina was very upset with the final product that portrayed her in a bad light. Marina claims a lot of stuff if you watch interviews with her. That she'd been manipulated. Things she said were taken out of context, or she was forced out and out to tell lies by fear of deportation. Alright, this is The Immortals, a novel. This is just a novel, but it still fits in this section. But it's a novel about Marilyn Monroe's relationship with Jack and Bobby Kennedy. Sometimes only in fiction can the truth be told. There may be some truth to that. Sometimes it's safer to say it's just a story. This is a graphic novel. Who Shot JFK? Not exactly, but it's got a lot of pictures and cartoons, and it tries to deliver a conspiracy theory to a reader. This is a very popular and expensive book among conspiracy theorists. This book I bought at the sixth floor museum in Dealey Plaza, in the gift shop. It's all about the museum and trying to maintain it. It's from the perspective of the sixth floor museum, which obviously is the perspective that's where the shooter was. So, but it's still an interesting souvenir. This book is called Target JFK, The Spy Who Killed Kennedy. This is my most recent acquisition, and it has a whole new theory, and it's also got supporting pictures and stuff in the middle. A theory about who one of the gunmen could have been. Now this book looks ostensibly like a book about Peter Lawford, the actor, but a lot of conspiracy theorists rely on this book. They think that Peter Lawford knew all of the answers. And it is interesting how many individuals connected with Marilyn Monroe and Kennedy that he knew, and where he was at when all these things happened. Peter Lawford married into the Kennedy family, and definitely, if you want to start studying it, this is a book to get. Now, this book is about Bobby Kennedy's assassination by United Press International. This is just straightforward. Loads and loads of pictures. This book was published in 1968, less than a year after it happened, so don't look for conspiracies in it. Although there's a lot of unanswered questions about that assassination too. This is called JFK Reckless Youth. It's really just a story about him when he was young. It's background about President Kennedy. The kind of man he was. But if you study this stuff, you'll find that all of these are interconnected. This is called Blood, Power, and Money. How LBJ killed JFK. One of the more common suspects, typically helped by the fact that Evelyn Lincoln, John F. Kennedy's personal secretary, put in writing that she thought that Lyndon Johnson did it. This is called Killing Kennedy by Bill O'Reilly, and you're not going to find anything here conspiracy theories wise. Bill O'Reilly is the newest version of Case Closed. He straight up believes in the Warren Commission. He made a movie about it based on this book. So, but it's still an interesting thing to have in here. It's an opposing point of view, and there's nothing wrong with having opposing point of views. And finally, this book's called The Third Bullet. It's not even a clue, it's a whisper, a trace, a ghost echo drifting down through the decades via chance connections so fragile they would disintegrate in the puff of a breath. But it's enough to get legendary former Marine sniper Bob Lee Swagger interested in the events of November 22nd, 1963, and the third bullet that so decisively ended the life of John F. Kennedy and set the stage for one of the most enduring controversies of all time. So, it's a novel. But, nonetheless, still has a place here. And that's my collection. And, gonna put back my magazines. And this one. I like to keep it on the bottom shelf. So that's my collection of Kennedy conspiracy books.